The book are just finishing, still having a little tweak here and there. It's called Lotus. It's just a working title. It's a book about prostitution, and there are two main characters. The lead character is a girl called Lotus, and she is a migrant worker. She leaves her village, a very poverty-stricken village, to work in Shenzhen, and something terrible happens, and she ends up as a prostitute. The two main characters, one is a sex worker, another one is a photographer who is obsessed photographing her. So it's of course it's a love story, and it's a book about a young woman finding herself. You probably would ask why I'd be interested in prostitution. The reason for that is that my own grandmother, my maternal grandmother, the one who was extremely important in my life, she brought me up. And shortly before her death, 10 years ago, I discovered my grandmother, my own grandmother, was a sex worker. She was orphan and became orphan at a young age, and then she was sold into prostitution. So I was really quite shocked and shaken, but it made me think about her life. And so ever since then, I just become a fascination about prostitution, about sex workers. So what's the life like? You know, what keep them going? What's their survival mechanism? And then shortly after this, my death of my grandmother, and after I discovered how she was a sex worker, I ran to a brothel, and in China I went to a hairdresser in Shenzhen. I wanted to get my hair done. The girls were there, they're giggling, and they said, "We don't know how to cut your hair." And then I noticed on the floor there was very little hair shavings, and in the normal. So, and then I realized, just clicked, that it's actually front for brothel, and that's all happens so often in China. The brothels are, they use hairdresser, beauty salon, massage as a front. And so I started chatting with one of the girls. She's from Sichuan. And she told me some of her. Anyway, so this is how I become interested. A huge amount, of course. It's been very, very difficult, and I've finished. I think I try to think of this. It took me a long time to finish, because in about 10 years. But during which time I also worked. I wrote articles. I did public speaking. I did some other projects. But anyway, so it's been very difficult, and for one important reason, my own life. Now I live a very privileged life. Even though I didn't have an easy life. I worked for 10 years as a factory worker, but even factory worker, my life is far removed from being a prostitute. So anyway, so I imagine the life being hard, but it's just really one-dimensional. So I don't have the real experience. So I made friends with the sex workers. It's actually very difficult. They move about. They use their fake names. They change the telephone numbers. They try to dodge policemen. So. And I also worked for NGO. These NGOs devote themselves to help sex workers. So I worked for this NGO, distributing condoms, and talked to them and made friends with them. And I had some really amazing insight into their lives. Of course, I done lots of research, spent lots of time with them. And another reason I forgot to mention is that prostitution for me is just an interesting window to see the tensions brought by reform, social change. Prostitution, probably many people don't realize. I know India has this problem. Prostitution exists in most countries in the world, even in North Korea, even if that's not obvious. But prostitution in China has grown to be a huge industry. In 1949, after communists took over power, they shut the brothels and everything. The prostitutes were reformed, sent married off, and worked at factories. And then in recent years, with relaxed social control, with this with more money, with wealth, with growing tendency of hedonistic, to become a huge industry. And also prostitution has become the part of the political business game. If you do business, you bribe officials, you go to fancy restaurants. But going to fancy restaurant, going to banquet is not enough anymore. Often they hire prostitutes, entertain them. It's become part of that game. So anyway, so for me, that prostitution is just a window to see the social problems, social issues, and of course, the vast majority of the prostitutes are migrant workers originally from the village. They come to the city to work, and because they don't enjoy migrant workers, they don't have the same access to education, to healthcare, and lots of jobs are not open to them. So there are many reasons that lead to, of course, the temptation of money. Lots of reasons. Anyway, so this book just explore that. That's quite an interesting question. I think I would say that prostitution has probably become really massive. In the very olden days, prostitution, because in the olden days, before the communists took over, the prostitutes, especially the high class ones, they are often the most talented women. They were trained to play music instruments. They can read poetry, because in those days, decent women are not supposed to go out, and they couldn't socialize. So to have some fun, some elegant company, and the men often engage courtesan. So that's very, very different. And my grandmother, in those days, there were different, like as in today, there was different layers. But I think nothing like today. The prostitution has become such a huge, massive industry. And I think probably the China's the tradition, in the olden days, like my grandmother met my grandfather on the job. And then he took her as a concubine. So in those days, for men, the way to show prestige, power, was to keep concubines. Some rich ones keep 10, 20. The emperors got hundreds. So I think that's also that the mentality is also still holds swing in today's society. Men often keep mistress, and there's something they don't feel. Some men don't feel shame about it. They boast about it, and they set up homes for them. Sometimes the women even give birth to bear them children. So I think this kind of old mentality also has a factor. Yes, it's just a massive. And if you stay in the hotel, sometimes you get a phone call, women offer proposition themselves. Yes, it's a big issue. In China, there are so many different layers. I think there are about 7 layers. Starting from the very high class ones. For example, in Beijing, there was one was shut down recently. Working there, one night you can get something like 20,000 pounds. Let's say, how much is that? That's about 200,000 rupees for one night. And those women, they are often educated. And then there were freelancers. There are also mysteries, and I still see them as they call them arnai. They are the mysteries of rich businessmen or government officials. I see them as prostitutes because the base for this transaction is not based on love, emotion, based on money. That's prostitution. And then there are some working at massage parlor, some high class massage parlors, and there was a lower massage parlors. This kind of middle low level make up the majority, about 70%. And then there were people working in the street. They don't have even their own place. Some of them renting very small place. in the outskirts and very dodgy, very poor place. And there are also women working, serving, the migrant workers working the construction site. They work there. During the day, they will cook for them. In the evening, they offer sexual service. They were probably just barely better off than beggars. So they are huge. Yes, they are vast. She works there. She was kind of a lower middle level. She works at a massage place. Well, in many massage places, we call them straight massage, but it also is a sexual massage. Yeah, she works in one of those places. It's also a love story, but it's as I said, it's a woman finding herself. She's also Buddhist. That's her way to, because she feels bad. This is a way she cleansing herself. Like my grandmother, she was also a Buddhist. The majority of Chinese are still, like me, non-believers. But my grandmother was non-practicing Buddhist, and I believe that it really helped her to go through a lot of hardship in her life. And my brother, about 20 years ago, became a Buddhist. He was a troublemaker. So in my house, in my parents' home, is still Buddhist shrines, everything. Yes, I think the book is kind of two main characters. I experimented a lot how to tell the story. I try to tell the story from his point of view, from her point of view. And I find it both very limiting now. So it's alternated. The story goes on, but it told us from one chapter. It's told by narrated by her, another one next by him, because he's more intellectual. The main character, the male character, he's highly educated. He has a business, and his company goes bankrupt. So anyway, so that's from that we can give all kind of more paramotic view of the society. Anyway, so I experimented. That's why the book took so long. Yes, one chapter is his story. Another one is her story, her voice. No, just two people, photographer and the prostitute. No, but there are a lot more characters. There are two main characters.